Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed. At 1,000 subscribers, I'll be posting a special video. I grabbed the wrong doorknob and walked straight into hell. My name is Aaron, I'm 27, and yes, I know how dramatic that sounds. I didn't think anything bad waited behind that door. I just pushed it open with my hip because my hands were full. I had Jessa's shoes in one hand and my phone in the other. The door swung in and my brain slammed to a stop. She was bent over the edge of the bed. Her dress yanked up around her waist like some stupid movie. His shirt was open and his belt hung loose. He was behind her, close enough that I could not pretend confusion. Both of them froze like someone cut the sound. For half a second, I did not recognize him. Just a man in a half-open shirt and pale skin. Then he turned his head and the face snapped into place. The uncle from rehearsal dinner, the one cracking dumb toasts. The word uncle hit my throat and stayed there. I should have backed out and pulled the door shut. You know that instinct to just pretend you saw nothing. My body did not listen, my hand tightened on the knob. I just stood there like a busted security camera. My mouth opened and nothing came out except air. Aaron. He said my name like a warning and a test. That snapped me harder than the actual scene. I realized he was not surprised I existed in this hotel. He was only surprised I was in that room. Jessa twisted around fast and grabbed the top of her dress. Her hair was a mess, her lipstick blurred across her mouth. She yanked the fabric down, almost slipped, caught herself on the spread. Her eyes found me and went huge, wet, furious. Not embarrassed first, not ashamed first, just scared I was there. This is not what it looks like. She got that sentence out before even breathing properly. I almost laughed because it was exactly what it looked like. Her voice shook and cracked on the last word. He let out a low sound that might have been a curse. Out in the hallway, someone yelled for the bridesmaids. Their voice echoing down the corridor felt weirdly far away. Photos in 5 people, let's move. The normal rehearsal chaos kept rolling outside the door. Inside, the 3 of us stared at each other like hostages. I took one step backward into the hall. The edge of the door dug into my back. My fingers slipped on the metal and I almost dropped the shoes. I'm sorry, wrong room. The sentence sounded fake even to me, like a bad script. He moved first, which still makes my skin crawl. He adjusted himself with one quick practiced motion. Belt up, zipper, shirt tugged straight like he had done this before. His eyes never left my face while he fixed everything. It felt like watching someone erase a crime in real time. Jessa smoothed her dress, hands shaking so hard they blurred. Her cheeks went blotchy and her chest rose too fast. She looked from him to me like tracking a ball. Aaron, please. 2 words and I knew she was not talking about forgiveness. I nodded too fast, head jerking like a bobblehead. That nod was the stupidest contract I ever signed. I had no idea what I was agreeing to. Keep quiet, play dumb, pretend this never existed. All of that sat heavy in that tiny motion. 5 minutes. He said it toward the hallway, not to us. Like we were running late for a casual meeting. I could hear footsteps getting closer along the carpet. I finally pulled the door shut so hard it rattled. The corridor felt too bright, too loud, too normal. 2 bridesmaids rushed past, arguing about missing earrings. One of them bumped my shoulder and laughed an apology. Where's Jessa? You lose the bride already. My tongue tasted like metal, and I forced a smile. In the room fixing her hair. I heard my own voice and almost did not recognize it. Too high, too smooth, like someone doing an impression. They nodded and kept moving toward the next door. Nobody looked twice at me shaking in the middle of the hallway. I stepped aside and pressed my back to the wall. My heart pounded hard enough that I could feel it in my gums. I stared at the door I had just slammed shut. Every part of me wanted to rip it open again. Also, every part of me wanted to run for the elevator. You know that buzzing sound in your head after a shock? Like the moment after dropping a glass and before it shatters. That is what the hallway felt like around me. Bridesmaids shouting, someone laughing, a phone ringing somewhere. All of it muffled under this loud humming in my skull. The door clicked open again a minute later. He walked out first, tie still loose, face calm. He did not hurry, did not look guilty or flustered. He could have been leaving a boring meeting. Only his eyes gave anything away when they flicked to me. We made eye contact for maybe half a second. He did not smile, did not frown, just studied me. Like he was weighing options, sorting risk, picking a move. Then he gave one little nod back, a mirror of mine. It felt like being drafted into something wit. Out signing up. He turned down the hallway toward the event room. Someone called his name and he turned on a relaxed grin. The flip from private to public made my stomach lurch. He slapped a groomsman on the shoulder and cracked a joke. Everybody around him had no clue what his hands had just done. Jessa stepped into the hall after he disappeared. Her dress sat right, veil straight, lipstick fixed. You would not know anything had happened from 10 feet away. Up close her eyes were too bright and her breath uneven. She spotted me and jerked her chin toward the far end. Don't. She mouthed it without sound, lips forming the word sharply. Her gaze cut into me like it could hold me in place. I stayed pressed to the wall, fingers digging into the shoes. She moved away before I could answer or even breathe right. A coordinator popped around the corner with a clipboard. Bridesmaids, let's go, we're losing light. There was no daylight problem inside this hotel, but whatever. They herded us toward the elevator for the photo round. My brain still lagged back in that room with them. In the elevator, one girl joked about Jess's pre-wedding nerves. Everyone laughed and started trading stories about panic dreams. I forced a laugh because silence would have been weird. My throat felt raw, like I had screamed into a pillow. I kept seeing his hand on her hip every time I blinked. We spilled out near the ballroom where the photographer waited. He clapped his hands and started arranging us into lines. Bridesmaids on this side, hold the bouquets like this. He moved fast, bossy, familiar with chaotic groups. I clung to the motions because they gave my body orders. Jessa finally joined us at the front of the line. The photographer cheered and called her his star for the day. She laughed too loudly and adjusted her dress again. Our eyes met for a fraction and she looked away quick. My chest tightened because that was not how we did things. We shuffled closer together for the first big group shot. Her hand brushed mine and then grabbed hard. She squeezed until my knuckles ground against each other. Please. The whisper barely reached me under the photographer's shouting. I did not answer, I just let her hold on. My smile felt carved into my face, stiff and wrong. I stared past the camera at a random point. If I met her eyes, I was afraid I would crack. The shutter clicked again and again while my stomach turned. He joined the group on the other side of the groom. Uncle. That word finally formed clearly in my head and stuck there. He slid into place, hand on another relative's shoulder. He did not so much as glance in our direction. Everyone look here, 3, 2, 1. The photographer kept firing, calling jokes, naming people wrong. I watched him through the gaps between bodies like a creep. At one point he adjusted his cuff and his gaze lifted. We locked eyes over a row of smiling relatives who knew nothing. His expression did not change, which somehow made it worse. Not fear, not shame, just calculation and a tiny question. Are you going to blow this up? That is what I heard in that heavy, quiet stare. I blinked first and that felt like another small surrender. Flash after flash hit us and my cheeks started to ache. Jessa leaned close enough that I could feel her shaking. Talk later. The words slipped out of her mouth on an exhale. They hung there between us like a deadline I had never agreed to. I just nodded once, tiny, more out of muscle memory. Every nod was another thread tying me into their mess. I could already feel it tightening even as the session dragged on. Everyone else just smiled and cheered for more fun poses. None of them knew we had already crossed a line we could not uncross. She cornered me before I could slip away from the ballroom. 1 second I was reaching for the door handle. The next her fingers hooked my wrist hard enough to sting. Walk with me. No question in it, just pressure and panic. She hauled me down a side hallway toward service doors. Her steps were too fast for someone in formal shoes. I kept glancing back like someone would call us out. Nobody cared, everyone was busy chasing their own tasks. Which somehow made the whole thing feel even more twisted. We cut through a staff corridor that smelled like grease. She pushed open the back exit with her shoulder and hissed. Out. Cold air hit my face and actually helped for a beat. Then I saw her expression and my stomach flipped again. Her makeup looked perfect, her composure did not. Jaw clenched, eyes wild, fingers trembling around a clutch. She stood there breathing hard like she had sprinted miles. For a second neither of us spoke, it felt like a standoff. The rehearsal noise inside buzzed through the closed door behind us. "What did you see?" She threw the words like an accusation, not a question. I stared at her because the answer was obvious. "You know what?" I walked in on. The silence after that line stretched sharp and ugly. She flinched, not much, just a twitch at the corner. "Then you know why we are out here right now." Her hand went to her hair and yanked at a curl. "You cannot open your mouth about this." Every word landed heavy, like it weighed more than it should. I laughed once, quick, not amused at all. "You dragged me outside to give me a gag order." My voice came out harsher than I meant, made her blink. "Do you hear yourself?" Something in me wanted her to at least wince. She stepped closer until I could see her mascara clumps. "Listen to me because I am hanging by a thread." Her breath shook as she tried to lower her tone. "If you tell anyone, the whole day goes down." She glanced back at the building like it might overhear. I crossed my arms to keep my hands from shaking. "So the plan is just pretend I watched nothing happen." I heard how bitter that sounded and hated myself. At the same time, I did not walk it back. I needed her to feel at least a fraction of my disgust. "It was a mistake." She blurted it fast, then swallowed like the word burned. "One stupid moment, nerves, whatever you want to call it." Her eyes glossed over again and she looked away. "We stop now and nobody has to get hurt." That last part snapped something in me. Nobody except your future husband when he finds out later. The phrase future husband scraped on my throat going out. Her head whipped back to me, eyes sharp with anger. "Do not bring him into this right now." I stared at her, stunned that she even tried that angle. "He is already in this even if he is clueless." I jerked my thumb toward the hotel like he stood there. "He thinks you are inside picking music, not grinding on family." The word family came out louder than I intended and echoed. She grabbed my wrist again, nails digging in. "Stop saying it like that, you know it sounds worse." Her grip hurt enough to make my eyes water. "He is not my blood relative, not some secret inbred thing." Her voice cracked hard on that last bit. I froze when she said that part out loud. I knew the basic family tree but had not focused on it. Hearing her spell out the lack of shared DNA shifted things. Not enough to make it okay, just enough to complicate it. My brain started running down all the awful loopholes. She saw the hesitation and rushed into the opening. "He married into the family, he is just an in-law." She lifted her hands like she was weighing invisible arguments. "We are adults, nobody is being forced or groomed here." She said it too fast, like she had practiced the line. I leaned back against the concrete wall to steady myself. Being technical about genetics does not make it less gross. The words came out quiet but very clear. "If his wife heard you right now, she would lose it." That image made my chest tighten in a different way. Her shoulders crumpled for a second at the mention of the spouse. Then she straightened like she pushed that thought away on purpose. "This is not some big romance, it is just stress release." She laughed once, harsh, like she knew how that sounded. I needed something to shut my brain up before the ceremony. There it was, the excuse that would stick in my head later. I watched her rub her temples with both hands. "Nobody smells like booze on me, nobody sees any marks." She listed those points like she was checking safety features. "Without you walking in, it would have been over and gone." That line hit me straight in the ribs. Without you walking in. Some part of me absorbed the blame before I could stop it. Like I had kicked down the door and started the mess. Reality and guilt tangled until I could not tell them apart. I shoved my hands into my dress pockets to stay still. "So your plan is silence and hope it never slips." My voice went flat, which scared even me. "What happens when he wants another round of stress relief?" We both knew that question did not need an answer. She stared at the ground for a moment, jaw tight again. "It started before this week, I am not pretending otherwise." The admission came out low and rough like gravel. "But I was cutting it off after today, this was the last time." Her eyes jumped back to mine, desperate for me to believe that. That sentence made my skin crawl even more than the scene. There was history there I had not known, and now it mattered. My thoughts slid toward every dinner, every private joke, every glance. I yanked them back because chasing those memories would wreck me. I needed to focus on what stood right in front of us. I exhaled hard and rubbed my forehead. This is not just your secret, you dragged me into it. My chest hurt from holding everything inside since that door. If I keep quiet, I am lying to a lot of people. Saying that out loud made the weight feel even heavier. She stepped in so close our foreheads nearly bumped. Please, I am begging you, Jew. Get me through this weekend. Her voice dropped almost to a whisper, like confessional-level quiet. You know what he has covered for us, you have heard the numbers. Her hand waved toward the hotel like it was a giant receipt. I blinked because I had not connected those dots properly yet. Covered what exactly? I heard my own suspicion sharpen in that question. She swallowed and glanced back at the upper floors. The venue, the bar, the extra days, the band. She started counting on her fingers, each one a new hit. The dress alterations, the photographer, the shuttle buses. The list kept going until I felt slightly dizzy. Most of it is on his card, not my parents'. Her voice thinned out on that last admission. I just stared at her while that sank in. So it was not only disgusting, it was financially tangled. If this blew up, money and loyalty would explode together. People would pick sides based on invoices and outrage. The whole thing would turn into a family war zone. You see why I cannot have this coming out right now. Her mouth trembled but her eyes stayed hard. It is not just my relationship, it is the whole event. She pressed her palms together like she was praying to me. One word from you, and everything collapses before the vows. There it was, the trap snapping fully shut around me. It was not just about right and wrong anymore. It was about whether I would be the grenade in their lives. I hated that she was framing it like that, and still. It worked because of course it did. I looked past her at the loading bay doors. Inside the hotel, someone shouted instructions, tinny through walls. The normal chaos of wedding prep rolled on untouched. Nobody out here but us, and a couple of discarded crates. The distance between our little corner and their happy noise felt huge. If I promise, what changes? Does he back off? I knew I sounded naive and still needed the answer. She nodded fast, too fast, like a bobblehead. Yes, I already told him we are done after this weekend. Her fingers twisted the edge of her veil until the fabric puckered. I studied her face longer than she liked. So this is me blessing your exit plan, basically. A bitter smile tugged at my mouth without permission. If I keep quiet, you get your perfect day and clean slate. The words perfect day tasted rotten going out. She did not deny it, which almost impressed me. I am trying to fix a mess, not make another one. She stared straight into my eyes, which she rarely did in fights. You are the only one who can blow my life apart today. Hearing that twisted my stomach in a fresh new way. The worst part is I understood the panic under everything. I knew her type of fear, the kind that scrambles reason. The idea of calling everything off probably felt impossible to her. So instead she wanted to patch the leak and keep sailing. And she wanted me to be the patch. I dragged in a long breath that did absolutely nothing. If I stay quiet, it is for those guests in there. I jerked my chin toward the hotel so she knew my terms. Not for him, and honestly not even really for you. The look on her face when I said that almost cracked me. She blinked hard and one tear slipped free at last. Fine, do it for whoever you need, just do it. Her shoulders sagged like someone cut strings holding her up. You will not regret this, I swear, I will handle everything. The confidence in that promise felt paper thin. I stuck out my hand because words felt too slippery. It was a stupid gesture and I knew it. She stared at it for a second, then grabbed on tight. Her palm felt clammy and cold against mine. We shook like we were signing some cursed contract. Back inside. She dropped my hand and squared her shoulders again. Her bridal smile slid back into place like a mask. She pushed the door open and the noise swallowed her whole. I followed a step behind with that promise lodged in my throat. That handshake should have been the end of it. A secret packaged up and shoved into some dark corner. But every time I replay that moment now, I see it differently. I did not just agree to silence, I agreed to own fallout later. And I had no idea how soon later would arrive. My alarm never finished its ring because I crushed it. I shot upright in the hotel bed with my heart racing. That bedroom scene from the day before hit instantly again. Not soft or blurry, just sharp enough to make me nauseous. For a second, I honestly considered packing and disappearing. Instead, I swung my feet down and forced myself upright. The room felt too quiet for what the day carried. I kept repeating one thing in my head like a chant. You promised to keep it together until this wedding ends. Even now, I hate how much that promise still steered me. By the time I reached the bridal suite, noise already spilled out. Laughter, music, people talking over each other with fake calm. I paused at the door and pressed my hand. D to the frame. No one inside had any idea what I knew. That thought alone made it hard to breathe for a second. I pushed in and everyone cheered like I was late. Jessa stood in the center with a drink and bright grin. She looked energized, almost wired, not like someone on the edge. Her gaze skimmed over me, then dropped to her phone. The screen kept lighting up on the counter behind her. I kept drifting toward it without meaning to. Every time someone grabbed her for something, the phone flashed again. She would slide over, tap fast, lock it, then whirl back. Normal eyes might call it nerves, I saw something else. It felt like watching a pot boil with the lid pushed down. One of the bridesmaids cracked a joke about cold feet. The whole room burst out laughing louder than it deserved. I made some noise too because silence would sound strange. Jessa tipped her head back and laughed like nothing was wrong. Then she glanced toward that phone again like it might bite. Everything okay? I asked it casually while handing her a bottle of water. My tone sounded light, but I knew she heard the edge. She took the drink and kept her gaze on my face. Her fingers brushed my wrist in a tiny warning squeeze. Big day, too many details, brain is loaded. She tossed the water aside after one small sip. Someone called her name to adjust her veil and jewelry. She stepped away before I could push any farther. I watched her smile in the mirror and almost believed it. Almost. From the doorway, I could see into the hallway mirror. Through that reflection, I caught sight of him walking past. Suit pressed, hair neat, wearing a friendly public expression. His wife hurried beside him, pointing at her phone. He listened, nodded, then glanced toward our busy suite door. For a moment, our eyes crossed in the reflection only. He did not slow down, but something in his jaw tightened. It was quick, then gone, almost like a glitch in a video. No one else noticed, they were too busy fixing details. I felt my stomach lurch like I had been shoved. Back then I told myself I was imagining everything. Sitting here now, I know I was not hallucinating that tension. I watched him disappear around the corner and exhaled slowly. I reminded myself that we had a deal in lines. If they stayed away from each other, I stayed quiet. Mark came by the suite a little later with coffee. He poked his head in and the bridesmaids squealed on cue. He carried a drink holder and lopsided smile for Jessa. Good morning, my almost wife. He leaned in and everyone made those cheesy little noises. I swear my chest physically hurt during that greeting. Watching him kiss her like nothing had shifted made me dizzy. She wrapped her arms around his neck and held tight. Just a beat too long before she pulled back with a grin. I saw her thumb check his collar like she needed control. He turned to hand me one of the cups. I got yours how you like it, figured you needed it. He bumped his shoulder lightly against mine like usual. She throwing everyone into chaos yet or still calm. The way he trusted me with that question nearly broke me. I focused on the drink so he would not study my face. Normal level of chaos, nothing too wild yet. I kept my voice steady and even, which felt like lying. He relaxed, nodded, then stepped back toward the doorway. Good, I just want her to enjoy this and breathe. If you have ever lied to a good person, you know. There is that moment where you think your skin might split. I watched him wave to the girls and disappear down the hall. A tiny mad thought went through my head out of nowhere. Tell him now, get it over with before anything else builds. I did not move. Instead, I turned back into the room and caught Jessa staring. Her shoulders were stiff, lips pressed together, eyes searching mine. She mouthed one word across the noise, which made my throat close. Please. Just that, like we had not already signed our secret deal. Hair, makeup, jewelry, the hours blurred together in a rush. Tasks stacked on top of each other until my brain numbed. People kept shoving things into my hands and giving directions. Every time I stopped moving, the images from yesterday flashed up. So I stayed busy because stillness meant seeing them again. We finally loaded into the shuttle headed for the ceremony space. Everyone chattered about vows and playlists and honeymoon rumors. I sat by the window and watched the city slide past. Jessa dropped down beside me and locked our shoulders together. Her knee bounced nonstop like her body wanted to outrun itself. "You holding up?" I kept my eyes forward because hers were too intense. She let out a sharp breath that sounded half like a laugh. "Ask me after I get through the walk and the vows." Her voice dipped quiet on the last part like she was unsure. My spine stiffened at that tiny crack in her confidence. "Is there something I should know before we get there?" Eh. The shuttle hummed underneath us and everyone kept talking loudly. For a second it felt like we sat in a bubble. She dug her nails into her thigh through the fabric and stared down. "No, I am just nervous, normal stuff, ceremony jitters." She forced a grin that did not reach anywhere near her eyes. "We will get through today and then things calm down." Her focus darted to the front where the driver watched traffic. She leaned closer so only I would catch the next words. "Remember our agreement, you and me, straight through tonight." The way she phrased it made the pact feel sinister. Like we were co-conspirators instead of friends in dresses. I felt my head move in a slow, reluctant nod. Inside, a quieter version of me was already planning an exit. The venue buzzed with staff running last checks when we arrived. We were ushered into a side room to hide before guests sat. The air felt thick with perfume and leftover nerves. Bridesmaids scrolled their phones and adjusted straps and cracked jokes. I stood apart and watched Jessa pace small circles near the door. Every few minutes someone came in with a new update. Guests lining up, efficient ready, music on standby. Each announcement made her speed up her pacing, not slow down. She kept glancing at the wall clock like it offended her. I could almost see her counting down to something that was not vows. Then her phone vibrated on the table again and again. She rushed over, checked the screen, then locked it quick. I caught a glimpse of a familiar contact name and froze. She shoved the device under a folder like she had touched fire. My stomach flipped because I knew exactly who was texting. She straightened and checked the mirror without looking at herself. "I need a minute, I am going to get some air." Her tone tried to sound casual, but I heard the strain. One of the bridesmaids offered to tag along with her. She shook her head too fast and grabbed her bouquet. "I will be right back, seriously, I just need space." She pushed past me before I could get in her way. The door clicked shut behind her and the room kept buzzing. Nobody except me found that exit odd for someone seconds from walking. I felt something cold settle in my chest like a warning. You know that feeling when the pattern finally lines up? When all the little weird pieces suddenly point to one obvious thing. That hit me right then, hard enough to make me sway. Of course he wanted one last meeting before the ceremony started. Of course she would try to give it to him. I stepped out into the hallway before anyone noticed I moved. The corridor stretched empty, her dress trailing around the far turn. I followed, keeping enough distance that she would not hear. My pulse hammered in my ears louder than the venue music. Each step felt like choosing between loyalty and basic sanity. She slipped through a side door near the catering stations. I grabbed the handle and eased it open just enough for a view. Beyond the doorway, a short path led toward a small garden. Jessa hurried down it, bouquet clutched tight, veil lifting in the breeze. At the far end, another entrance opened from the opposite wing. I saw a figure step out on that distant side. Suit, polished shoes, familiar walk, enough to identify even from here. He started down the path toward her without any hesitation. I did not know what they planned to do in those minutes. I only knew I could not watch them touch again. I moved before my brain caught up with my feet. Shoved the door wide and strode into the path after her. My heels sank a little, but I kept going and going. "Jessa!" The word tore out of my throat louder than I intended. She spun around halfway down the walkway, eyes wide. When she saw me, her shoulders tensed and her mouth tightened. He stopped where he was, still partially shaded by the overhang. For a tiny second, the three of us just froze in a line. Then I closed the distance between us fast. "What are you doing out here right now?" I kept my voice low, but it still shook. Behind her, I saw him watching, and that made it worse. She angled her body to block my view of him. This is not the time for your lectures. Oh, it is exactly the time, this is the last chance. I step close enough that our bouquets brush together. You walk any farther and I am done protecting this mess. Her nostrils flared and she tightened her grip on the flowers. You promised you would not blow everything up today. I promised to keep my mouth shut if you stayed away. Saying it out loud snapped that handshake into sharper focus. You are heading straight toward him minutes before your ceremony. I jerked my chin toward the man waiting at the other end. Do you hear how insane that sounds when I spell it out? She flinched and glanced over her shoulder toward him. He lifted one hand slightly, as if asking what now. The motion made my skin crawl for reasons I could not say. She turned back to me with panic flickering across her face. You cannot do this, not while everyone is inside waiting. I moved sideways until I blocked the view of the path. If she wanted to reach him, she would have to push past me. I can and I will, I am not your cover anymore. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might show through my dress. Take one more step toward him and I run straight to Mark. There it was, the line clear and loud between us. Her lips parted like she might argue, then snapped shut again. She stared at me like I had slapped her in public. For a moment I thought she might actually shove me aside. Her fingers twitched on the stems like she wanted to throw them. You would not actually tell him you love him too. Her voice dropped to a hoarse whisper that scraped my nerves. Think about the fallout, the families, the money, everything. She listed those things like they were more fragile than him. Not once did she mention her own dignity or safety. Exactly, I am thinking about all of that now. I took a breath that trembled more than I liked. I am done pretending this is just some weird coping mechanism. My eyes stung, but I kept them locked on her face. I will not watch you crawl back to him before you say I do. Behind her, he took a hesitant step in our direction. I saw his outline shift closer and my rage spiked. I lifted my arm and pointed straight at him across the path. Turn around and go back unless you want spectators. My voice carried farther than I meant and bounced off the walls. He stopped. Even from that distance, I could see his jaw clench hard. A beat passed where I honestly thought he might keep coming. Then he pivoted and stepped back through his doorway without a word. The door closed behind him with a dull, heavy sound. Jessa watched the entrance swallow him and her shoulders sagged. When she faced me again, tears finally gathered at the corners. You just made things so much more complicated. She whispered it like I had ruined a neat escape route. I almost laughed because from my angle nothing about this was simple. Good, maybe complicated will keep you from doing something worse. I shifted closer and pressed the bouquet into her hands. We go back inside right now and you stay visible. I tilted my head toward the venue where music played faintly. You want that aisle, you walk it without detours. She stared at me for a long moment that stretched forever. Then she nodded once sharp, like she barely trusted herself. Fine, you win this round, but you hold that secret. Her words tasted like defeat and threat rolled together. I pretended not to hear the last part and turned away. We walked back toward the building side by side in silence. The noise from the ceremony space grew louder with each step. My hands shook so badly I had to hide them in the bouquet. I told myself I had finally taken some power back. I did not realize yet that the real explosion still waited ahead. I dropped my bouquet as the music test started. It slipped right out of my fingers and hit the floor. A couple of petals snapped off and skidded toward the aisle. Bad sign, huh? One of the bridesmaids muttered that and laughed too hard. The coordinator swooped in and shoved the bouquet back at me. We are lining up right now, no more drama. She pointed us into position like we were chess pieces. My hands clamped around the stems so tight they hurt. I stared down the aisle and felt everything inside tilt. Up front, the arch waited with Mark beside the officiant. He bounced on his heels and kept fixing his cuffs. Even from the back, I could see his nervous grin. He waved at us like this was the fun part. Seeing that hit me harder than any guilt speech ever could. Behind me, Jessa adjusted her veil for the 10th time. Her breathing sounded short and sharp over the orchestra music. Is this straight? She tugged at the fabric and kept missing the same piece. I turned and fixed it while my stomach clawed at itself. You are good, you look steady from here. My voice came out smoother than my pulse allowed. Her eyes searched my face for something I did not give. Stay with me through this, okay? She squeezed my elbow like I was her personal railing. The coordinator held a headset to one ear and frowned. Groomsmen ready, parents seated, place yourselves on your marks. She snapped her fingers at the band to start the entrance music. Everything moved into position like a practiced routine. Inside my head, nothing felt practiced, everything felt wrong. First couple started down the aisle on cue. People turned in their chairs and smiled and filmed. I watched them instead of watching where I stood. My palms went slick around the bouquet and almost slipped again. I kept seeing that bedroom every time I blinked. The next pair stepped out and the coordinator waved at me. You are next, go when the music swells. She shaped the air with both hands like a conductor. I forced my shoulders back and took my spot alone. My legs felt like they belonged to somebody else. As the beat rose, I moved because my body obeyed. I walked the aisle and kept my eyes on the exit sign. If I looked at him, I would crumble right there. People smiled and whispered as I passed their rows. They thought my tight face was just normal ceremony nerves. At the front, I peeled off and took my place. I finally let myself glance toward the guests on the side. He stood near the bar entrance, drink in hand, relaxed. The in-law who had just been turned away in the garden. His gaze slid across the crowd and then landed on me. For a second, the whole room seemed to shrink around that stare. He did not smile or flinch, he just watched. Like he was waiting to see which role I would pick. Accessory to the cover-up or detonator in heels. My throat closed and I had to look away fast. The music changed to the slower track for her entrance. Guests twisted in their seats to see the doors swing open. Only the door stayed closed longer than they should. I saw the coordinator whisper something into her headset, frustrated. My heart started slamming against my ribs in sharp bursts. Mark leaned toward the officiant and asked something low. The officiant gave a calm gesture toward the doors like relax. He checked his watch, then scanned the bridesmaid's line. His gaze paused on me for a beat too long. I felt my face heat because I knew I looked guilty. He frowned slightly and tilted his head toward the side. It was a tiny motion that basically said, "Get over here." I stepped out of line before my brain could veto. The coordinator tried to grab my arm, I dodged her reach. I walked around the guests toward the arch like it was a scaffold. What is going on, she okay? His voice was low, tight, nothing like the earlier joking. He adjusted his tie for the 100th time and failed. She asked for a minute. The officiant offered that and focused on his notes again. I could have nodded and walked back to my spot. I could have kept my promise like she begged outside earlier. Instead, my chest hurt so much I felt dizzy. The words rushed up my throat before I could stop them. I saw something yesterday. Mark's attention snapped fully to me at that. Saw what? His eyes narrowed and his posture stiffened like he braced. He studied my face like he was ripping past layers. You look like someone who swallowed a grenade. I almost laughed because he was not wrong. My fingers dug into the bouquet stems until they bit. You know how she wanted space before rehearsal yesterday. My voice shook and I sucked in a breath that rattled. I walked into the wrong room when I went to find her. He glanced toward the guests like he feared being overheard. Is this about cold feet? Is she thinking of bailing? The fact that he thought that was worst case killed me. I saw the whole thing again, the bed, the half-undressed bodies. I realized there was no clean way to package this sentence. I opened that door and she was with your uncle. The words came out firm and strange like someone else spoke. Not hugging, not talking, fully involved, nothing ambiguous at all. I did not dress it up or soften it for him. His expression emptied like someone erased the features one by one. He did not say anything for a full stretch second. His hand dropped from his tie and hung there useless. You saw them actually. He could not even finish the thought out loud. I gave one short nod because there was nothing else to give. The officiant cleared his throat gently and checked his watch again. Guests shifted in their chairs, wondering why the pause stretched. Mark's chest rose once in a deep, dragged breath. If this is some kind of messed up joke, I need you to stop. His voice shook on the last word, which I had never heard before. I wish I were messing with you right now. My throat burned and my eyes blurred at the edges. I tried to keep it contained, I tried to force distance. I could feel my heart thudding in my hands and neck. She called it nerves, she begged me to stay quiet. That last part lit something behind his eyes. Begged you. He repeated it like it tasted sour going out. So you have known since yesterday, and stood here smiling. His jaw worked like he was chewing through rage. You paid for everything, your whole family is here today. The sentence came out fast because I needed him to understand. I froze, I thought maybe it would stop, I was wrong. I heard how weak that sounded the second it left my mouth. Now everyone waited for a wedding that did not deserve to happen. From the corner of my vision, I saw the bar entrance. The in-law had moved closer, drink abandoned on a table. He watched us from the shadows near a pillar. I watched Mark notice him and follow my gaze. Something in his shoulders settled into a frightening stillness. Stay her. Eh. He turned away from me, without waiting for agreement. He stepped down from the platform and walked toward the crowd. No rush, no theatrics, just a straight line with purpose. I knew in my bones that nothing could stop him now. Guests turned as he passed their rows, confused. The coordinator hustled toward him with her headset raised. He brushed past and kept moving toward the bar area. I followed at a distance because my legs refused to root. Every step felt like chasing a train already leaving the station. He reached the other man and stopped a breath away. The two of them stood so close their suits almost touched. Around them conversation dimmed as people sensed trouble. What did you do? Mark's words hit the air like a punch. The older man's mouth flattened into a defensive line. I do not know what you think you heard. He adjusted his cuff and tried to angle his back to the room. Walk this off, you are worked up for nothing. Guilt rolled off him louder than anything he actually said. You have been sleeping with my bride. Mark raised his voice enough that the nearest tables heard. The words cut through the music and chatter in one slice. Chairs scraped as people twisted around to see the clash. My heart slammed so hard I thought I might pass out. His aunt froze halfway through a sip of her drink. Glass lowered in slow motion as the sentence registered. What did you just say? Her eyes pinged between their faces, hunting for denial. Color drained from her cheeks so fast it scared me. The in-law reached toward him like he wanted to calm things. Let us talk somewhere private, this is not for everyone. He darted a quick glance toward me like this was my fault. It was not how she is making it sound. He jerked his head in my direction with a sharp movement. Oh, so Aaron just invented walking in on you. Mark's voice cracked and then rose again even louder. Across the room people stopped mid-bite and stared frozen. I saw parents pushing out of their seats in slow disbelief. The band faltered and then the music died completely. Jessa appeared in the doorway to the ceremony space, breathless. Her veil sat crooked, her lipstick slightly smeared at one corner. She took in the silent room and the cluster by the bar. What is happening? Why is everyone staring? Her laugh sounded wild and high like it might shatter. Mark turned toward her in one tight pivot. I watched his whole face change when he looked at her. Not soft, not loving, just wounded and furious all at once. Tell me he is lying, tell me nothing happened with him. His voice echoed in the sudden quiet like a mic turned up. She stopped halfway between the aisle and the confrontation. Her gaze bounced from him to the in-law to me. The skin around her mouth tightened, her fingers strangled the bouquet. Who told you anything? What did you hear? She still tried deflection, even with the noose visible. He did not hear, I told him what I saw. I stepped forward, knees wobbling, palms slick with sweat. Dozens of eyes landed on me at the same time. My whole body wanted to fold in on itself and disappear. I opened a door yesterday and you were all over each other. There it was in front of everyone, no careful language. No space left for slippery interpretations or half-truths. A low ripple moved through the crowd, shock and whispers. Someone at one of the back tables actually gasped out loud. I wanted to vanish yet could not look away from their faces. His aunt stared at her husband like he was a stranger. You told me you were helping with logistics yesterday. Her voice shook so badly I barely understood the words. He reached a hand toward her, face finally crumbling. She stepped back like his fingers carried poison. Mark's parents arrived next to them with tight expressions. What is this about? We can discuss later after the ceremony. His mother's smile twitched at the corners like it hurt. There will not be a ceremony. Mark did not even glance at her when he said it. Jessa's knees buckled for a second and then locked again. You cannot blow this up over nothing, it was a stupid slip. She tried for a steady tone and failed mid-sentence. We were overwhelmed, it meant nothing, it is handled. Every excuse made his expression flatten more. You hooked up with my relative and used his credit card. He spoke each word like it weighed more than the last. You let him pay for our celebration while sneaking around. His hands shook as he tore the boutonniere from his jacket. The small flowers dropped to the floor and rolled under a chair. No one moved to pick it up. I told you I was ending it after today. Her tears finally spilled, streaking lines down her carefully done face. I panicked. I made the worst choice. I was trying to stop. She took a step closer and reached for his sleeve. He pulled his arm back like her touch burned. You were going to stand in front of ever. Yonan promised forever. His voice came out raw enough that a few people flinched. With him still expecting a side relationship whenever you felt anxious. He laughed once, short and joyless, then shook his head. There is nothing to salvage here, not for us. Around us the room felt skewed, like gravity shifted sideways. The officiant hovered near the arch, holding his binder awkwardly. The coordinator stood frozen by the aisle with wide, stunned eyes. Guests whispered into their hands like they could hide the sound. Every single person watched this relationship disintegrate in real time. His aunt finally stepped forward and slapped her husband. The crack of palm on cheek snapped through the silence. He staggered back and pressed his hand to his face. She stared at him a second longer, then turned away shaking. Someone guided her toward the exit while she wiped her eyes. I am so sorry. Jessa whispered it to Mark, not to anyone else. Her bouquet slipped from her fingers and hit the floor. Flowers scattered across the polished surface near his shoes. She still reached toward him like he might catch her anyway. He looked at her hand, then at me. For a second I thought he would direct everything at me now. But his anger had a very clear target, and it was not me. I am not marrying you, not today, not ever. He dropped the ring box into his pocket like it weighed a ton. He stepped past her and headed for the doors without ceremony. Relatives called his name, but he did not slow down. The doors swung open and shut behind him with a heavy thud. People surged into little groups, buzzing with questions and theories. I stayed where I was, stuck between the ruined aisle and the bar. Jessa turned toward me with eyes I barely recognized. You promised to keep this between us until tonight. Her voice shook with something between grief and fury. I opened my mouth and nothing useful came out. In that split second I understood I had just traded one kind of guilt for another. I hit post and then almost threw my phone. The whole story sat there on the screen on that forum. Title details the mess in the ballroom, all of it. I sat in my parked car outside my apartment holding my breath. For a second I wanted to delete everything and vanish. Notifications started popping before I even locked the screen. Little numbers climbed like a thermometer I did not want to watch. People were commenting faster than I could even read titles. I slouched down in the seat like someone might spot me confessing. My hands would not stop twitching against the steering wheel. I finally opened the thread again and started scrolling. Some users called me brave, some called me a snake. Half of them screamed that I waited too long to talk. The rest yelled that I never should have said anything at all. Funny how strangers online managed to match my own brain. One comment stuck harder than it should have. You did the right thing in the worst way possible. I stared at that sentence until my eyes started to sting. Because that was exactly how it felt when I replayed everything. Right action, awful timing, everyone bleeding anyway. My phone buzzed again, but not from the app. Her name flashed on the caller ID like a siren. Jessa. I let it ring out once, twice, then hit decline. My heart still sped up like she stood right beside the car. She texted immediately after, just 3 short words. So you posted. No question mark, just accusation packed into that tiny line. I locked the screen and dropped the phone onto the passenger seat. For a moment all I heard was my own breathing. The last time we spoke in person was at the hotel. Not during the explosion after, when the guests trickled out. I found her in a side corridor with her shoes off. Mascara streaked down her face, hair half undone, dress wrinkled. She looked less like a bride and more like someone after a storm. "You happy now?" That was the first thing out of her mouth when she saw me. She wiped under her eyes with the back of her hand. "You just had to tell him in front of everyone." Every word landed like spit, sharp and wet. I leaned against the wall because my knees felt unstable. "I told him because he was about to commit his life." My throat tightened again, remembering his face at the arch. "You were still planning to walk down that aisle." I heard my own voice wobble and hated that weakness. He knew enough to make his own choices. She kicked her shoes farther down the hall like they offended her. "You made sure there was a crowd, you wanted witnesses." She stepped closer so I could smell the stale booze on her breath. "Do not pretend this was only about saving him." That accusation punched harder than any internet comment later. I tried to handle it quietly, you pushed it to the line. I could feel the scene in the garden still buzzing under my skin. "You walked toward him again, I warned you what I would do." "Every why time I reminded myself of that, it sounded thinner." She laughed, short and wrecked, nothing like earlier that morning. "You think I went out there for some romantic moment?" Her forehead dropped against the cool wall for a second. "I went to tell him we were done, that it was over." Her voice dropped so low I almost missed that last part. That was the first time I heard that version from her. I wanted to believe it so badly my chest hurt. But belief would not rewrite what everyone had already seen. "You could have done that days ago, months ago, before this." The timeline was the blade, not just the act itself. Footsteps echoed at the end of the corridor toward us. His aunt walked past dragging a suitcase with a stony face. She did not look at either of us, not even a flicker. Her jaw was clenched so hard the muscles shifted under her skin. The suitcase wheels rattled like a verdict. We both watched her disappear around the corner without speaking. That sound of luggage rolling away still haunts me more than the slap. Somehow that was the moment I fully understood the damage. Money, marriage, trust, all of it rolled toward the elevator. None of that could be glued back together by secrets. Everybody lost today, congratulations to us. Jess's laugh cracked again, this time with no humor at all. "You got to be honest, I got to be humiliated." She rubbed her hands over her face like she wanted to scrub herself off. "Where exactly is the happy ending you aimed for?" "There is no happy ending here, that is the point." I pushed off the wall because I could not stay propped forever. At least it ended before paperwork and kids were involved. It sounded cold even as I said it, almost clinical. Real people stood behind those words, not hypothetical examples. She stared at me like she had never seen me before. "Stop acting like you are the moral compass of this family." Her shoulders shook and her whole body seemed smaller. "You kept my secret until it hurt you more than lying." That line dug under my skin and still sits there. She was not wrong, and that is what makes it sting. I waited until I could not carry it anymore, that is true. I waited until it shifted from her problem to mine. By the time I finally broke, the blast radius was massive. Knowing that does not make the choice less necessary, just uglier. Back in my car with the forum open, I watched more replies. People asked what happened after everyone left the venue. "So here is the update nobody really wanted, but all of you demanded." The reception never started, they turned the whole room into a fallout zone. By the end of the night, half the centerpieces were dumped into trash bags. The in-law stormed out with two relatives flanking him. I saw them practically hustle him through the loading dock door. He refused to look in my direction as he passed, not once. His wife stayed behind with her family for an extra hour. Every time someone reached for her, she pulled away like contact burned. Mark disappeared for a while after the ceremony explosion. Family kept asking if anyone had seen him, voices tight and frantic. I found him eventually outside near the parking lot fence. He leaned against it smoking even though he never touched cigarettes before. His hands shook so hard ash dropped onto his suit. "When did you know?" That was the first thing he asked when he noticed me. He did not sound angry at that moment, just emptied. "Down to the hour, tell me." His eyes were bloodshot but very, very focused. I swallowed because this was the part I dreaded most. "Yesterday before rehearsal, I walked into a room by accident." I picked my words like stepping around broken glass. I tried to draw lines after that, I swear I did. It still felt flimsy set against the look on his face. He dragged in a long breath that shook on the way out. So you slept on it and let me greet my wedding day. He flicked the half-finished cigarette into a puddle and watched it hiss. I am not blaming you for what she did, I get that. He paused, then met my eyes again with something sharper. But I cannot pretend this did not change how I see you. That sentence hurt more than I expected, almost physically. I trusted you to rip the Band-Aid off if I ever needed it. His mouth twisted into something that was not really a smile. Instead, you waited until the wound was wide open already. Honestly, that one conversation did more to wreck me later than the ceremony. I drove home that night with my stomach tying knots. Every red light felt like judgment for delaying the truth. You ever replay conversations on loop until you feel sick? That became my nightly routine for weeks. Jessa tried to call the next morning and the day after. I let both attempts go straight to voicemail while I paced. When I finally listened, her messages came in two flavors. Sobs and apologies mixed with long stretches of rage. Each new voicemail shift. Ted between begging and blaming like a pendulum. I agreed to meet her once at a coffee place a month later. She arrived in a hoodie and sunglasses like anyone cared anymore. Her hands wrapped around a cup she barely touched. I started therapy, by the way, in case you were wondering. She blurted that before we even finished hello. Good, you needed someone who was not me for this. I kept my palms flat on the table so she would not see them tremble. She snorted short and bitter, then stared at the foam. Do not worry, I tell her you did what you thought was right. She lifted her gaze and locked onto mine. And I also tell her you enjoyed being the hero in front of everyone. That line hit hard because a small, ugly part of me wondered that too. Did I wait until the audience was seated before I cracked? I hated that she put voice to the worst version of my motive. Some truths and some accusations sound almost the same. She went quiet for a long stretch, then exhaled slowly. I call it an addiction now when I talk to her. Her thumb traced the edge of the saucer in shaky circles. Feels better than calling it random cheating over and over. Her voice dropped at the end like she was confessing to a stranger. I did not rush to comfort her, which surprised even me. An addiction you kept feeding while other people built a future around you. The sentence came out flat but not loud. She flinched and nodded once, eyes shining again. Yeah, that is the part I cannot undo. We sat there until the ice melted in both of our drinks. She told me his aunt moved out, filed papers, cut contact. She mentioned relatives picking sides in group chats like sports teams. Every update made my chest heavier, not lighter. The family tree looked more like a burned blueprint now. When we finally stood, she hesitated before hugging me. I did not step in, so she stayed where she was. You will always be the one who lit the match. She spoke quietly, almost gently, which made it worse. I do not know if I can ever be around you without seeing that moment. That was the last time we saw each other in person. Now our contact is limited to those short, sharp texts. She sends updates sometimes about her therapist, about trying to stay clean. I send neutral replies about work or weather, and avoid night talk. Every thread eventually circles back to that ballroom in some indirect way. Back in my car, the app refreshed with more hot takes. Some users begged for information on where everyone ended up. So here it is, since you are still listening to this chaos. The marriage never happened, the family split into careful camps. And I walk around with this weird label of whistleblower friend. Do I regret telling the truth? No. Do I regret waiting until the altar was practically smoking? Every single day, yeah. Two things can be real at once even if they cancel sleep. Another notification slid down over the top of the screen. New message from an unknown number, just a string of digits. I opened it expecting spam and read the first line. This is probably weird, but thank you for not letting me marry her. I knew exactly who it was before I finished the sentence. My thumb hovered over the keyboard for a long time. I could have written a full essay or nothing. In the end, I typed 3 short words and stared at them. I am still sorry. Then I hit send, knowing that apology would never really feel finished.